All right, so I like the author makes like he goes purist take note because he's already dealing with like you have nerdy people who have been looking at this stuff for years. All right, this book represents one person's view of a huge literary and social phenomenon. Okay, it's I'm not gonna please everybody. And he just talks about how right, the millions and millions of copies produced and sold of manga, right, in Japanese comics. And he explains what they are, the difference between them and the Americans, right? Because the American term comic book is a misnomer for a magazine of 30 or so color pages, a third of which they are advertisements, right? It's purchased almost without exception by young boys and by adult men with comic book collections, and the sales of the American comic books have declined dramatically since the 50s. Remember, I keep saying at one point, the comics that you see, the American comic books from the 30s, the 40s, and 50s, they used to sell millions of copies. They were read by children and adults. You had many different genres, so it's kind of interesting when you see America, that America had a comic culture. Okay? And you'll see how those comic books that the GIs threw out in occupation duty, of course, the Japanese kids were looking at that, and it sort of helped revitalize the Japanese comic culture. Right? Always the war, I say. You probably want me to shut up saying that already, but I'm not. So, of course, Shonen Jump, right? They come in the big phone book comics. I remember getting those sometimes in Japan, in Books Nippon, the one on 57th Street. There was another bookstore, Japanese bookstore too. I forgot, somewhere near wasn't that far from the library. The library. My friend B worked there. That one though, forget it. You went in there, that Japanese dude, he was like, "Don't read the comics." He'd yell at you, chase you out. Remember that guy, jerk off. Anyway, but I like what he brings up about it. Right, they show the different ones. Doraemon, right? The big pop. You've seen this, right? You got Hakaba no Kitaro, Graveyard Kitaro. I never saw this, but this is yokai. This is very popular, dealing with that. Of course, Akira Toriyama's first series here, Doctor Slump. Right? Look at the. When you get into the themes, right, and readers, this section here, right, the whole thing with Japanese comics, just like I bring up the movies, right, the giant monster movies, okay, the stuff that normally you would think would be, it's not so serious. The Japanese, not that they don't have humor, they have a lot of humor, but they take this stuff very seriously. They treat it very seriously, like an art form. They treat, in terms of its what's shown, and he makes up the good point, right? Right, the exaggerating actions and emotions to the point of melodrama, right? And by paying lovingly attention to the minute details of everyday life, they always mention, "Oh, Japanese art is simplistic," but they're real. If you really look at it, the people look kind of cartoony sometimes, but they have a lot of attention to detail, particularly of objects. I'm not even talk about machinery and everything else. Okay, but the real thing here, and you get this, right? As the Japanese describe them, the comics are very wet, right, as opposed to dry. That is to say, they are unashamedly human and sentimental. Okay, I can't think of a better term, at least to describe the manga, the anime, and other Japanese stories. At least particularly going back, things are changing now. Okay. Right, and after the war, with the advent of strong narrative structure and stories for children magazines, children growing up refused to relinquish the comics, and adults began reading material designed for children. Okay, this explains, boys and girls. Right? You have a wide audience. You have comics for different people. Can you imagine? Oh, you don't like this comic? Read. Here's a comic for you guys. Oh no, you can't have that. And I like how he mentions what is the original of the word manga, right? It can mean caricature, cartoon, comic strip, comic book, or animation. This deals with the Japanese written language. Okay, it was coined by a Japanese woodblock print artist. Okay, Hokusai, right, in 1814. The Chinese ideograms, right, man, which means involuntary or in spite of oneself, and ga, right, pictures. So, if anything, he's trying to describe something like whimsical sketches. Okay. It's interesting to note, though, the first ideogram has a secondary meaning, and you have that in all languages, actually, right? Secondary meanings, right? Subtext. Right? The meaning of morally corrupt. So interesting. The term manga did not come into popular usage till the beginning of this century, so they had different names for cartoons. Or punch pictures, right? Because you had like the British style magazines of humor that the Japanese were following at the time. They also mentioned, of course, the differences in the narrative structure. Right? The length of Japanese comics has made a possibly extensive use of purely visual effects. Right? The American artists are more limited in space. Okay, of course, the daily newspapers. Remember those? You remember? They still have those. As a kid on Sunday, even every day, man. I remember talk about comics that I forgot about. The newspaper. Yours truly would get the newspaper a lot, even as a young adolescent, because I wanted to be educated. That's why I know everything they said back then was a fucking lie. But anyway, sorry about that. Yeah, the comic strips in the newspaper, right, and they would be in color on Sundays and have more space, right. Actually, and comic books themselves, the ones you get in the store, or most likely the news rack, or in this grocery store, right? The comic books rarely allot more than 20 pages per month for an artist. In contrast, the Japanese comic has 30 pages to use as he or she pleases per week. Oof. Yeah. You can get a lot more stuff in. You can take time. You can develop things a lot slower. You're in it for the long haul. Right? You could, it could be perishable commodity, but it also can, right? Have the same narratives as novels, or films, as say the same things. Now, of course, this is a big issue here, because one of the issues, in terms of framing, it makes a good point that a lot of Japanese comics, right, are very cinematic. Okay, you use a variety of camera angles. Okay, now American comics do that to a degree, but the Japanese take it to another level. That's why you can make cartoons and films of these things rather easily. You already have a lot of this sort of style, the camera moving in and out. Right? The experts at page layout, exactly. They have learned to make the page flow. Flow. That's a term for the Japanese manga. Not just the action, the flow of it. Right? Galaxy Express, right? Lazy Matsumoto. Build tension, invoke moods by varying the number of frames used to depict the sequence. Cinematic techniques of fade out, fade in, montage, superimposition. Right? Like the poetry, Japanese comics tend to value the unstated. In many cases, the picture alone carries the story. Right? It's right, as in Japanese movies, right? Symbolism is important, right? Like every Zatoichi movie opens establishing what season it is. Okay, and you can see it by, what's growing, what's not growing. If he's wearing a scarf over his head, right? It's just really, really nailing it. Okay, it talks about the flexibility and layouts, but it also has something to do with the language. Right, the language itself. So you can have like stuff like this that's interesting setup, right? The Japanese, the way it's written, it's like you read it up and down, and then from this direction to that direction. Or maybe not. Maybe you read it the other direction. Right, the monologue is written both vertically and horizontally. Okay, what gives it this flexibility also is, right, Japanese language employs is not one but four entirely separate writing systems, ideograms. Right, you have the Chinese, the traditional. Two different syllabic scripts, right? The hiragana, which is cursive, and katakana, which is more angular. So you have, right, what I call script, which I can still write, thank you. And of course, this one here is the more angular, and of course, the Roman alphabet, aka English or any European language. It makes a good point. I'll just end this one here. The total effect above is speed reading. Now, this is why you have like a lot of the digital comics, or the comics that in Asia that everybody reads. The panels go up and down, like they scan it, right? The American comic is read slowly to savor lavishly detailed pictures, at least the higher level ones, right? The Japanese comic is scanned. It demands more of the reader. He must actively seek out the clues on the page and interpret them. Right? He skims over the pages with his eyes. Okay. I mean, on average, I don't want to bring up the whole IQ thing, because I never liked that, but the average Japanese is not a dummy. I can't say that about maybe other countries. Oh, Mazinga. Oh, I love going the guy. So why Japan? I had to say, obviously calligraphy. Calligraphy. I mean, all language is sort of that, but you really have a high detailed level here of drawing, fusing drawing and writing. Okay, calligraphy, right? Obviously coming from China. And this is a good point. Is Sergei Eisenstein, okay, Battleship Potemkin, right? The Russian filmmaker. He perceived a link between the ideogram and what he called the inherently cinematic nature of much of Japanese culture. Right? Several pictographs to express complex thoughts. It was a form of montage that included all the Japanese arts. And he added that his own study of ideograms helped him understand the principle of montage on which filmmaking is based. That is really good. That is a really good insight. I didn't even realize about Sergei. Yeah. Right, and Osamu Tezuka, of course, he said, drawing his comics, I don't consider them pictures. I think of them as a type of hieroglyphics. In reality, I'm not drawing, I'm writing a story with a unique type of symbol, right? Symbols. Of course, in the end, they bring up the idea of why is comics so big? Of course, Japan is a very crowded urban nation. Okay, and of course, this is all contributing to the negatives now that you have, right? And of course, the grueling cycle of exams, right, for the future, right? They always, I mean, all the Japanese kids are studying. You're out there playing, and you're getting hit by cars, and getting into rock fights. Well, there's a price to pay for that, and there's a price to pay for not doing that, I guess. Anyway, I'll wrap this up here. I'm not gonna go through every single chapter, but I'm gonna, probably make 2 more vids, maybe 3, of this amazing book. I might dedicate one video just to looking at these the samples here of these comics, showing the diversity of the Japanese comics. Okay, amazing. How much diversity you get when you're a homogeneous nation, huh? Counterintuitive.